Okay, I think we'll get started, and maybe a few others will join us. If not, we know there will be other opportunities to see this great wisdom. I'm just super excited today to have two all-stars joining us to talk about engaging with North Carolina communities, programs, perspectives from the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience, and from the North Carolina Coastal Federation. And I want to just say a couple words about each and then allow them to introduce themselves. I'll start with Andrea Weber. Andrea has been with NCORR, as we call it, since September 2021, and comes to the state of North Carolina with a great background from the Midwest and two fine institutions up in Syracuse, New York, a master's in environmental studies from SUNY ESF and in public administration from Syracuse University. And Andrea, if you would just say a couple words about you and your background, please.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate you guys hosting me today. As Mary said, my academic career is in public administration and environmental studies. From a on the ground perspective, I guess I've worked for local governments, both in a small town in New Hampshire and for Louisville, Kentucky for about 4 years. And then I spent 4 years with Indiana University's Environmental Resilience Institute. So I'll talk a little bit more about that during my presentation today, because it certainly relates to what all of you are up to.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And our second guest today is Todd Miller, who is currently the executive director of North Carolina Coastal Federation. He's actually the founder of the North Carolina Coastal Federation. I won't say the year, but it's back when I was actually also in graduate school at UNC Chapel Hill. Todd comes to us with a BS in environmental studies and a master's in city and regional planning from UNC Chapel Hill, and then he stepped out to form this fantastic organization, which I've followed for decades. Todd, would you say a few things about yourself, please, to introduce yourself to our group?
Sure. Thanks, Mary. Well, I'll give the years. We formed the Coastal Federation in 1982, so we're actually celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. I actually grew up in Carteret County on Bogue Sound, and except for my time in Chapel Hill, basically I've lived on the coast all my life. And our interests are primarily about how we go about maintaining what's so great about our coast while accommodating all the pressures and needs, both from a quality of life standpoint to the economy to the environment. And it's been an adventurous 40 years for me. So.
Absolutely. And if you don't know the Coastal Federation, I would encourage you to go online and look at all of their accomplishments. They also have an awesome daily newsletter that I'm subscribed to and learn a lot from. It has a incredible breadth, the culture of the coast, the ecology of the coast, everything that's happening there. So it's a great way to stay connected, and we're just really super delighted to have Todd with us today. So the way we're going to structure our hour is to have Andrea and Todd first tell us a little bit about their programs and how they interface with communities and with NC State faculty and professional staff. And then after both sets of openings, comments and presentations, we'll open it up for question and answer and conversation. So Andrea, you have the floor first. If you'd like to share your screen and take over, please.
Sure. Yeah. It's a pleasure to meet with all of you today. And thank you again to Amanda and Mary for the invitation. Again, my name is Andrea Webster. I am the Resilience Policy Advisor for the state of North Carolina in the Office of Recovery and Resiliency. And this is a relatively new agency or office within the state government. It was established in 2018 after Hurricane Florence. It's primarily the state agency that's managing the state's disaster recovery efforts, in particular, the administration of the CDBG disaster recovery funds. So I serve on, we call ourselves the Resilience team. I don't know if that's formal or informal or not, but that's what we call ourselves. And there's 4 of us. And 3 of us have been codified in the state legislature. The rest of the, I think about 200 staff within NCORR have not been codified in the state legislature. So they're still on soft grant funds. So it's an interesting department to work for. We're within the Department of Public Safety. So we are not in the Department of Environmental Quality, which has its pros and cons. So that's a little bit about us. So primarily we're focused on kind of serving the state and helping them respond to the big disasters that have been happening. But specifically my team is focused on planning for climate change. So that's my focus. Today, I want to talk about a few of our current programs, ways communities need help, and maybe some ideas for how you all could get involved. A little bit on my background. So I mentioned before that I previous to September of last year, I worked for Indiana University's Environmental Resilience Institute. That's an interdisciplinary, they're focused on interdisciplinary research focused on climate change. I was and am not a researcher. Instead, my role with the Institute was working with local governments across the state of Indiana to help them prepare for climate change and to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And my role really was to connect the researchers with the communities and try to match up those needs. So I'm really excited to meet with you all today because it was definitely something I really developed a passion for over the past 5 or so years. Okay, so as I'm talking with local leaders across Indiana and of course across North Carolina, there is obviously a capacity need and a funding problem. But more specifically, I think communities are, when you talk to mayors, they're really struggling with the day-to-day issues, the community issues, the economic development issues, the housing issues. And then when you put climate change on top of that, it just exacerbates all of them. And so that's what is on their minds first and foremost. Flooding, of course, we're seeing is a problem that is sometimes caused by upstream initiatives. It's also caused by just general development that's happening in a community. I recently heard some emergency managers say they're hearing from residents, oh, well, that field didn't used to flood, but now that's a subdivision, it floods. Why is that? And so, it's a matter of communicating how development contributes and how policies that structure that development can impact what's happening on the ground and how that causes flooding. And then, of course, we are really at a unique point in time in which there's a lot of funding coming down from the federal government and from other entities for resilience. And a lot of them are calling for shovel-ready projects, but it takes a lot of work to get to shovel-ready. It also takes a lot of work just to apply to the grant in the first place and to have the capacity to manage that grant. So, the federal government can send all the funding they want, but local governments need to be ready to receive it and know how to make use of it. So the 3 programs I want to talk to you about today are RISE, the Resilience Clearinghouse that we're starting, and then Datapalooza, which you may have heard about that happened last fall. So the first one is RISE. There are 3 components to this program. The first one is homegrown leaders. This is a regional leadership training workshop. It's managed by the North Carolina Rural Center, and it's meant to be a way to train local residents on how to use resilience as a tool for supporting economic development in the region. So that's not a project we're heavily involved in. We're only sort of involved in that on the side, so I'm not going to focus too much more on that, but I'm happy to answer questions on it if you have any. But I want to talk about these last 2 highlighted in blue on the slide. So the North Carolina Resilient Communities Guide is a resource we are developing. It's going to review planning steps for resilience that's specific to the state of Indiana, or I'm sorry, the state of North Carolina. Still gets me occasionally. And we'll also have a list of case studies that we will provide to folks to give them a sense of what's already going on in the state and who they can contact. Like sometimes it's nice just to call the project manager and say, how did you get this done? Because they're your peer. And so they can walk you through, you know, what they liked about their project and maybe what they would have done differently. So that's a little bit about the North Carolina Resilient Communities Guide that should come out later this year. So we're getting pretty close. We did a bunch of focus groups to kind of get a sense of what is needed in the state. A few of you may be thinking, well, there's plenty of planning guides out there already. But as we talked to local governments, it seemed like there was a need for a North Carolina specific planning guide that's structured within our state laws and regulations. And then lastly, there's this regional resilience portfolio program. So this is often referred to as RISE, but it's the portfolio program of RISE. And this is a program in which we are working with regions across the eastern part of the state to produce regional vulnerability assessments and to identify some priority actions that will reduce risk and enhance resilience. So all of these are technical assistance programs. And so that's the focus of RISE is providing some technical assistance. This is a map of the regions where we're working. So you can see it's in the eastern half of the state. The regions align with the COGS, the Council of Governments. We initially had intended to work at the watershed level, but that presented problems from a jurisdictional standpoint. And so we ended up just working with the councils of government, which I think is going to work out okay. It's definitely a unique program in that we're really looking at resilience from a regional standpoint. And so, you know, we're working with each region has a stakeholder partnership, which some of you may serve on. This is a group of local government officials, as well as maybe farmers or pastors or environmental scientists, or like anybody that lives in the region or knows about the region. We want to get their local expertise. And so they're on a regional partnership that we meet with monthly. They're the ones that are making the decisions on identifying the vulnerabilities across the region and identifying some potential projects to address those vulnerabilities. But we also have a technical assistance provider supporting them. So we're working with AECOM, Kleinfelder, and Tetra Tech. And I believe that the North Carolina Coastal Federation is a subcontract of Tetra Tech on the project. So we're happy to have you all involved in that. So those technical assistance providers are really, they're actually writing the vulnerability assessment. They're doing the data collection and analysis, and they're ground truthing it with the local stakeholders. And then they're drafting the portfolio piece of this. And then the other unique part of this program is that we have a facilitator assigned to each region. And so this is a person that was trained through the Homegrown Leaders program that I mentioned earlier. They live and or work in the region. And so they are a face that lives there. Otherwise, it's NCORR state agency and a contractor. And so we want to have, somebody who lives there and works there and is a member of the community be at the helm of this project. And so they're really great at providing input, at gathering stakeholders together and reaching out to them and engaging them. So we're really happy to have them involved. And then of course, from our NCORR resilience team, there's, 4 of us since we've divided out the 9 regions. So you'll notice on here that Wake County, Durham County, and Orange County are not included. That's because they already have the Triangle J Council of Governments with some other partners completed a resilience plan for those counties already. And so we wanted to help the counties that didn't have the resilience plan just yet. All right, so the deliverables of this project really are a regional vulnerability assessment, going to combine science and local knowledge, and then a portfolio of projects that have regional significance. So, we're looking at hurricanes and storms, flooding, heavy precipitation and storms, wind damage. We're looking at extreme temperatures, including high heat indexes, as well as high nighttime temperatures, which are incredibly important, and droughts and wildfires. So we're looking at all those hazards and how they're impacting housing, infrastructure, public health, the economic development of the community, and of course the natural environment. And so, we're having these conversations with the stakeholders, some of whom are more comfortable with these conversations and more familiar with these conversations than others. So it's both an educational opportunity and a chance for us to get input on the development of the plan. The number two, the kind of the final core deliverable, is this portfolio. So I want to stress that this is not meant to be a plan. Instead, it's meant to be a portfolio of 5 to 10 priority projects identified by the stakeholders with input and guidance from the technical providers. And those, each of those portfolios, each of the projects will have, it'll list out where funding could come from, who would need to be involved to implement it, what are the first steps that we need to take to pursue it. So it's really trying to line the communities up to head towards shovel ready. So, we don't want this just on the shelf. We want this to be useful. It's definitely different than a hazard mitigation plan and the structured nature of that. And, I think we really want the projects to be regional in scope. So the projects that are included will hopefully impact the entire region as opposed to just one individual town. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, we're really at a unique point in time in which there's all this funding that's popping up. And particularly, these are a lot of funding opportunities we expect to align with the projects coming out of the portfolio program. This Duke Energy Accelerator Grant is the third bullet down. That is specifically funding from Duke Energy, and they're going to try to catalyze one project. So they're donating about $65,000 per region to help them jumpstart a project. Which is nice, because we'll have action on the plan kind of as soon as it's been finalized, or I shouldn't call it a plan. We'll have action on the portfolio as soon as it's finalized. So lots of funding here. And so we're educating the stakeholder partnership on all this funding as we go along. So jumping into the Resilience Clearinghouse, the second of the 3 projects I want to talk about today. So this is or will be, it is not existent yet, it will be a website developed for the state of North Carolina to aggregate all the resources information for local decision makers to have easy access to when they're trying to make decisions about how to make their communities more resilient to climate change. And so, I think when I envision what this project will look like, I think of, a homepage with a bunch of different portals. There'll be a climate data portal that's heavily supported by the State Climate Office. There'll be a funding database. There'll be a case studies database. We'll probably integrate the Resilient Communities Planning Guide that I mentioned earlier. And so, at this point, we're starting to design what the site would look like and what might be included. And we have a steering committee that has state agencies as well as some nonprofit partners on it. We're thinking heavily about the coast. We're also thinking heavily about natural and working lands and how the resources that could support folks working with natural and working lands. But it'll be a statewide resource. And we want to have kind of a mapping component in it too. So like with the climate data portal, I'm definitely envisioning something where any local government could go to this website and see what their past climate is, what their projected climate is, and they could overlay that maybe with some social vulnerability data from the US Census. So the snapshot here is from I'm blanking on the name of it right now. It'll come to me. Anyway, yeah, this is a really great website. Headwaters Economics Neighborhoods at Risk tool. There it is. So, I want to have something like this in the website that users who maybe know nothing about GIS can still go in and play around with it and really start to understand how climate change is going to impact their community. And I mean, one thing I learned, hopefully this is not true in North Carolina, but when I was working in Indiana, there were plenty of mayors in North Carolina that had never seen a floodplain map. of their hometown. And there were also, in one case, I had one mayor that jumped out of his seat when I showed him a map of the census tract data for his hometown. So, I think it's maybe very obvious to some of us that this data exists, but it may be not as prevalent for other folks, or maybe not in their realm of existence. They may not know about it. Finally, I'll talk about the Climate Resilience Datapalooza. So we held this program in I think it was November, maybe early December last year. And we saw this need where, there's a lot of, researchers as well as nonprofit organizations and state agencies, they see this need to aggregate data, and so everybody's doing it, right? So a lot of people have this data, but not everybody knows where the data is and how to access it and really what's contained in it and what they can do with it. And so we wanted just to have that conversation. So this is a snapshot I took from Kathy Dello, our state climatologist, one of her slides. She really got into it. It was really great. Hopefully she doesn't mind I stole this. I gave her some credit. But we wanted it to be a nice event. Of course, it was virtual. Hopefully we can do it in person in the future. But the results were we had 8 presentations from data holders and managers across the state. Some were academic presenters, some were state agencies, others were nonprofits. And so we had them present, and we also had everybody in advance submit a form, which is some basic information about their data, some of which is provided here, so is it spatial data? Is it available to the public? How can you access it? Just kind of the basics of each data set. And then we sent that out as an attachment afterwards. And I'm really excited that it finally went live on a website today. We've been working with our IT team to get that launched, and it's live today. So I'll share that link in the chat later. But we have recordings of that event now posted live, as well as all the content that we shared. So hopefully that can be useful to folks in the future. I imagine we'll integrate this into the clearinghouse as well. But it's a nice way for us to get started. I think a lot of this data has been helpful for us as we're figuring out what's out there as we start to work with our RISE communities and with our across the eastern half of the state. So, it's all just real about talking and sharing and everybody getting to know what data is out there and how it can be used. All right, so I'll take a small breath here. And I think I just have about 2 slides left. And so I wanted to kind of briefly review ways we're working with academic institutions right now. And some ideas, and the next slide will be some ideas about other ways we could work with researchers. So right now, of course, we work quite a bit with the State Climate Office. DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, does as well. We worked, the 3 of us worked closely together as we were putting together the state's resilience plan. NCORR is going to be funding some work with the State Climate Office here shortly. They're going to be working on a study on the topic of precipitation intensity and frequency to update the IDF curves, or the intensity, duration, and frequency curves. They're going to evaluate some methods for adding projections into those curves. I think they're currently based on past events. We want to integrate projections. We also have some funding through the Community Development Block Grant, through the planning funds, to work with them on those projects. And I mean, otherwise, we really just, we stay in touch with them, we seek advice from them, they touch base with us. They send staff to our environmental preservation RSF, which stands for the Recovery Support Function, on a state disaster resilience task force. They also serve on some other committees, including the Clearinghouse Steering Committee. When we work with the Sea Grant, they're on some of our committees as well. They partner with us on a couple of our projects and some of our sister projects. They're serving pretty significantly on the stakeholder partnerships for RISE. We work pretty closely. We have a project going on with the Coastal Dynamics Design Lab at NC State. We've got a contract with them to do flood resilience blueprints like they did for the city of Lumberton, if you're familiar with that project. They're doing a similar type of project for the town of Whiteville. And then after that, they'll do about 3 to 5 more communities. They're going to look at, they're going to do a flood resilience study for those communities, including Whiteville, and propose some nature-based solutions based on the results. And then, we worked with NEMAC based out of UNC Asheville, and they provided some climate data for their resilience plan. They worked on the state vulnerability assessment. And then finally, UNC is sending us a student to support our work, and we'll support that student as well as they're finishing up their master's degree. So those are a few ways we're currently working with some academic institutions across the state. And, I think we can spend a lot more time, hopefully if we have some time at the end, to talk about ways we could partner in the future. But I mean, some ideas I've seen work really well in the past is when a researcher will write a grant to provide technical assistance community to help that community achieve some of their climate resilience goals. So that's worked really well. I think if you become familiar with how the CDBG grant funding can be used, I think there's a lot of creativity that can come there. And, we've always got our ears open for this. We're definitely open to meet with you guys if you have ideas. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk more about it in the Q&A time today. So here's my contact information. I should have put my cell phone number on there too, but I've got that in my email. You guys are always welcome to just give me a call randomly too. I'm definitely open to that. So I guess that's it for now. So I'll pass it back over to you, Mary.
Great. Thanks so much, Andrea. That's a lot of information, and there's a lot of opportunity embedded in all of that. Before we open it up to general discussion, I want to give Todd Miller an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the North Carolina Coastal Federation does and how it has partnered, some examples of how it has partnered with NC State faculty. So Todd.
Well, thank you. The Coastal Federation currently has sort of 5 major goals that we focus our work around, and they all relate to coastal resiliency and trying to reduce hazards. But in a nutshell, those goals, one is focused on oyster restoration or shellfish restoration on the state. You might ask, what does that really have to do with resiliency? But the health of our oyster resources depends a lot on the health of our coastal environment, which is very much influenced by flooding and other issues. So the ties are all there. We also have a goal that focuses on expanding the use of living shorelines along our coast. That's a nature-based strategy to deal with shoreline erosion around our 12,000 miles of estuaries, shoreline miles of estuaries, and it went from 10 years ago just a handful of those types of projects occurring. And what was occurring back then is that we were really bulkheading at most of those very valuable habitats and really destroying the habitat value of that intertidal area. So this has been a major push in North Carolina to try to come up with more environmentally compatible ways to deal with erosion. It's something that's also caught fire around the country as a technique, and I'm really pleased that this past session of the North Carolina General Assembly actually allocated over $4 million towards living shoreline work to really try to promote that. One direct grant to the town of Moorhead to do a major project that protects an island that's right off their waterfront, Sugarloaf Island, which is a major storm barrier for the downtown. And then also $2 million that came directly to us to do cost share with property owners to provide a financial incentive to get those projects to the head of the line ahead of more of the traditional stabilization methods. Another major initiative, which has really been the heart of our work all along, is water quality protection and restoration, as well as flood reduction. So much of what we do in terms of water quality relates to the land use practices and activities within the watersheds upstream of the coast. And so that work really focuses on, particularly where we've seen extensive hydrologic modification of these watersheds and trying to restore those functions back to those watersheds. And we've discovered that that is really the key to having good water quality, but it also obviously helps with flooding as well. So you actually achieve those goals concurrently. The fourth goal that we have is reducing marine debris. After the hurricanes starting in the 90s, what we observed is, there was a pretty good mechanism in place to clean up incorporated areas in terms of debris that got into our coastal waters and coastal shorelines. But the public trust areas were sort of forgotten, and the amount of debris that ended up coming from docks, other shoreline development that ended up in the estuary was extreme, and it just stayed there, not to mention more and more derelict and abandoned boats. So there's been a pretty major initiative since Hurricane Florence to do something about those forgotten areas. And the legislature has actually been funding coastal debris cleanup. There've been a number of crews hired, primarily using commercial fishermen, to actually go out and pick up the debris. And we're talking about millions of pounds of debris that have been removed now, and over 100 boats in the last year, thanks to funding both from the federal government and from North Carolina General Assembly. And there's now a marine debris action plan in place that not only deals with sort of the everyday trash that gets out there, but also the storm-related debris problems, which are horrendous. I mean, one of the biggest problems we have is there is no building code for residential docks, and a lot of property owners, go for the low bid. Then they get an inferior product, and they don't survive these storms, and all that treated lumber and other materials, just gets cast to the wind, and there's no mechanism really, until now to try to go after and remove that debris. So one of the things, we've been looking at is going back to the building code and trying to get residential docks, at least on the coast, included, so that, because construction practices have a lot to do with what will make it through a storm and what won't. And finally, we have sort of a general catch-all where we work on improving coastal management efforts in the state. North Carolina is fortunate that we have a coastal management program that's been in existence since the 1970s, and there's a mechanism to try to address existing and emerging coastal issues and head off problems before they become problems. And so we constantly work on a number of initiatives, like the dock issue, trying to figure out how to make our rules more effective to protect the environment. Over the years, having access to universities for our work has just been amazing. We're very fortunate on our coast to have, three major state universities, from Elizabeth City State to East Carolina to UNC to NC State to UNCW, and as well as Duke, and then the federal lab. So our access to expert scientific help has been unparalleled in terms of being able to do the work we do, and the willingness of faculty, particularly in the state universities, to step up and lend their expertise to these issues. With NC State in particular, working with the Keenan Institute there at NC State, they actually provided some financial support to us to develop help support the development of the shellfish mariculture strategic plan that was done a few years ago, which actually resulted, one of the recommendations was we needed a state pathologist to try to understand some of the shellfish diseases. And that was funded through the vet school and CMAS down in Morehead City, where that position now exists. And then Dave Eggleston there had been very instrumental in working on some of the oyster restoration strategies, including doing the basic science behind the strategy for our oyster sanctuary program in Pamlico Sound, which the goal is to build 500 acres of sanctuary to keep oysters productive in North Carolina. We've now constructed almost 400 acres of that 500-acre goal, and Dave's lab did the science that talked about how that would keep plenty of baby oysters circulating in the system so that we don't get recruitment problems like they have on the Chesapeake now. On the water quality work, we're currently doing a watershed restoration plan for the Newport River, which is one of our prime oyster growing areas in the state, but also one of the most endangered in terms of water quality impacts, and a river that's also had very significant flooding during Hurricane Florence. And we have faculty there at NC State, Angela Harris, who's in civil construction and environmental engineering, and then Natalie Nelson in biological and agricultural engineering, helping us actually collect some new water quality data to complement the state data that's done through the Shellfish program, and students actively engaged. And we're hoping to get out on Friday and get some new samples if we get some rainfall here. Also, there at Biological Sciences and Engineering, we have a long history working on wetland restoration with the faculty there, Mike Birchall and some others, that led to some of the strategies that we used on restoring nearly 6,000 acres of wetlands at Carteret County at North River Wetlands Preserve, as well as working up in Hyde County with both Lake Mattamuskeet watershed, as well as a drainage association north of Lake Mattamuskeet that's involving tens of thousands of acres of wetland restoration, using Farm Bill money, but also state funds and others to, and the science that's come out of NC State to design those wetland restoration activities. I also can't forget to mention Bill Hunt at Biological Sciences Engineering, who's been very instrumental in helping to shape the stormwater management strategies all over the state. And we've worked very closely with Bill, and currently a project where they're working with us to figure out the true cost of doing operation and maintenance of these permitted stormwater systems, so that the permit holders actually know what to budget each year to do proper maintenance. We have more than 15,000 stormwater permits that have been issued for coastal stormwater systems. The vast majority of those are out of compliance with their permits. And one of the big problems is the permit holders have no clue what they actually should be budgeting each year to do proper maintenance. And so we're hoping this project is going to provide that guidance. And of course, Barbara Dahl there has worked on nature-based strategies that have been important to things that we're focusing on as well. And then just to show the diversity, Richard Vendetti at the Department of Forest Biomaterials worked with us very closely on a micro plastic forum that we held a year or so ago under our marine debris goal. Microplastics are a huge issue that we're worried about, and the work being done through the textile school and others, leads to a better understanding of the extent of the problem in North Carolina, and beginning to come up with ways that we might start addressing that more effectively. In one final example, we're also working with Mary Lou Adour, who's in College of Natural Sciences or Resources at on the North County Eastern Sentinel Landscape Initiative. She's been coordinating that program, and the Department of Defense has added some resources that's enabled us to hire a staff person to work with her on coastal resiliency and adaptation strategies and projects to try to move those forward. So through that program, the DoD has actually set up a 3-year pilot effort to see if focusing on these resiliency issues as part of their landscape initiatives, bears fruit. And if it does, they want to replicate that around the country. So we've just launched that effort in the last month, and really trying to expand on the good work that has already been accomplished through the Sentinel Landscape. So that, there's a lot, and I'm probably forgetting things, but those are some good examples of where this cooperation and working together is so vital. Science is one of the magic ingredients in shaping public policy, combined with what the law says, and then the public interest and understanding. And I will, as Mary pointed out, we do have a news service called Coastal Review Online that is actually we're the publishers as the Coastal Federation, but the Coastal Review is a member of the North Carolina Press Association. We're trying to do legitimate journalism, and one of the things we want to do is more in-depth reporting on the issues and the science, and we've had a lot of articles talking about research and science, but we invite anybody that thinks they have something interesting that we should be reporting to be in touch with us, because we're always looking for good story ideas. So a lot, but I hope it stimulates some discussion. Thank you. So.
That's terrific, Todd. And you guys are involved in so many different things. I think that's a great introduction, and opens the door to a lot of directions that we might go down. I just wanted to say a couple things, and then all of you, I'd encourage you to turn on your cameras. We're going to be looking for questions comments from those of you who have joined the call. You can either raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask your question yourself, or you can put your question in the chat and Amanda will pick it up and ask it. But we, in the Coastal Resilience and Sustainability Initiative, we have identified 6 different thematic areas, and they overlap substantively with what Andrea presented and what Todd presented. We have a huge focus on modeling, data collection, predictions of climate change in the future, looking at flooding, sea level rise, and how we understand that with communities. We have an emphasis on natural resource-based economies. Oysters are a big part of that. Coupled human and natural systems and natural infrastructure, the best mix of natural infrastructure and built solutions to the challenges we have in front of us. Water quality is a thematic area. I don't need to go in a lot of depth more about, but one of the signatures of our initiative is community engagement. We want to do engaged research, co-produce our research with communities so that the solutions that we identify are appropriate to the cultures and needs of our different communities along the coast. We have our eye on equity and including communities that historically have been left out of the process. But one of the things that faculty bring up a lot is, how do I engage with communities? How do I get started? Who can be my connector? And you all are working with communities, maybe just to start the conversation off. You've mentioned folks that you're involved in now. What were the keys to successfully getting those partnerships started? How did you engage with faculty? How can they reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? How do you get started in this arena of co-produced research, if you will? Andrea or Todd, either one of you, jump right in. It's a big question, I recognize.
I mean, I think it's a two-way street, and I mean, we're, tend to be aware of people working on research or science that's related to the issues that we're involved in, and we're not shy about reaching out for help on those. But at the same time, I mean, we've had numerous faculty come to us with knowing what we're working on, and looking for ways to either partner on projects or on research grants and other things. I mean, I love this Newport River watershed plan, and that Andrea is part of the project team. She's sitting and sharing her expertise with assistant county managers, with town managers, the planners, as well as oystermen and others. So it's a real mixture, and I think the learning is going both ways from that. So But
So
I don't know if there's one formula for it.
no, there's not one formula. Are you said, Todd, are you open to faculty calling you up if they have an idea, something they're trying to work on, calling you up, asking for your help in collaborating on an idea?
We definitely are. I think when it works best is, when it really does align with things that, it's hard to take on a whole new issue if it's when your agenda is already really full, but if
Sure.
it becomes value added to the things that we're already attempting to do, we're definitely, we've relied so heavily on the university community to give us credibility on our work. Because we don't think just arguing for issues is the way, you have to have the facts and the science behind you. So.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that. A lot of it is really based on relationship development. So, I think if we aren't familiar with the research you're doing, we don't know that we can call on you for help when we see that connecting. So when we see that connection. So that's part of it. That's time intensive for both of us.
Mhm.
But hopefully it's worth it, right? Because as Todd was saying earlier, all the work we're doing is science-based. So we're really reliant on you and the work that you're doing. One thing I'd caution you on is to think through, I think like what you all are hired to do as researchers is to kind of chase what's interesting within your field. And that may not align with what a community needs in that moment. And so, as you reach out to us, I would challenge you to think about what's applicable for a community or what a community could get out of that. So think through that. Some other ways I've seen this get started in the past is, when I was at Indiana University, we were trying to get funding to work with some communities to help them start to tackle heat, right? Because all the communities are thinking about flooding, they're not thinking about heat. And so we had written some grant proposals that failed, but in those grant proposals, we had asked some state agencies for letters of support. And so then that state agency learned about the project that we were doing. And when we went back to them and said, thanks for your support, the grant failed, but we hope to try to find funding elsewhere. They said, oh, we actually have funding for that and we're really excited about it. So even just kind of asking for letters of support to let us know what you're up to, that can help. There's no one silver bullet for this stuff, but I think the main silver bullet is really just staying in communication and for all of us just to get to know one another to see what's going on.
Mhm.
So we can make connections as they pop up.
Yeah, I think one of the buzzwords now around campus is actionable research. So we want to do research that can be used, meets a need out there, and that development of those proposals takes engagement with others, whether it's policymakers or communities or both, along the way. Do you see particular opportunities coming that it'd be great to establish a broader network that might include NC State faculty? So, for example, Andrea, you mentioned all the funding that's coming along. Are there any things in particular where you're looking for new ideas, new voices, new folks to become engaged?
Yeah, well, I think, there's a lot of funding coming down through the bipartisan infrastructure law in particular, and even some of the funding requirements are asking for innovative projects. And when I think of innovation, I think of universities. So, I think if you guys are researching approaches to solutions that would be considered innovative and you want to test out one of these projects in a community, then we can try to get you connected with a community where that might work. Or maybe you have an idea and we can make an introduction. So maybe you have an idea where it might work within the state. So that's one thing that stands out to me at the moment. But Todd, do you have other ideas?
One thought, we're in an unprecedented time in terms of the amount of money available to spend on resiliency. And, I think we need to document what comes of it, and what lessons we learn, because the system is very strained trying to figure out how to spend that money most effectively, and we want to hopefully document and publicize the wins and the successes, but we also need to learn from the struggles that come from that as well. And there's 20 million going to developing a flood resiliency framework, that this DEQ is organizing now. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be plenty of lessons learned from that process. The money for stormwater infrastructure that is about to be distributed, 82 million across the state. The problem is nobody wants to fund monitoring or science around actual projects, but maybe more traditional research money paired with that would be a way to really do some really good evaluation of how those investments actually work out.
Yeah, that's a great point, Todd. I mean, I think it can make a grant application incredibly strong if a community is submitting evaluation of an innovative technique. And so sometimes those grant applications require matches, and if they can use the funding that you're bringing to the table, then that could be a really great partnership. But I mean, there are some funding opportunities that require evaluation, which means that they could potentially fund it too.
Mm-hmm. Are there questions in our audience? I encourage you to chime in. I don't need to ask all of the questions. Walt, would you like to ask your question? I see your hand up.
Sure, yeah. So about potential funding sources, this could be either one of you. I'm wondering if you see prospects for funding for coastal restoration projects coming out of carbon credits associated with blue carbon. Is this something you see happening? Is it sort of always 10 years away, or can you see this actually materializing in the nearer term?
I could throw in my 2 cents, which, I think there's definite potential there and value there, particularly with some of the volunteer markets, and it's very much worth pursuing. My opinion is it's got to be combined with other funds and reasons to be doing those types of projects, because the amount of money that gets generated really isn't enough to cover the true cost of doing many of these projects. But it's like one more additive benefit and one more additive value that, when you piece the funding together, can help facilitate that type of work. So it's important, but I don't think it's going to carry its own weight necessarily. So,
can I ask a quick question?
Sure, go ahead, Hamid.
Hamid Krim. Science in general, and I was just wondering what the process is, and whether it's okay to either engage either Ms. Webster or Mr. Miller insofar as describing some of our ideas for projects, and whether they fit within the realm of of interest in the programs that they just described. Thank you.
Yeah, we would welcome any discussions like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's always helpful to kind of put some thought into what the outcome would be as we approach the conversation. But yeah, I think we all have the same goal, right? We're all trying to address climate change across the state and beyond. So anything that can match
our own research program
I'm sorry, Hamid.
long-term hurricane prediction. That's basically the gist of it. And I think it's relevant, but I'm not sure.
I think if you have a specific idea, Hamid, and how you want to move it forward, that would be the time to reach out. I met with,
Well, I was just wondering whether it made sense to either do it by email or speak in person, well, not in person, but by phone or Zoom or whatever medium that's preferred is okay with me.
I think reaching out by email would be a great start. Speaking for our speakers, and they could follow up with a phone call when they have the time to do that. That might be a suggestion I would have. I did want to touch on one other topic as folks are jumping off as we run out of time here, is we have a large group of faculty who are engaged in citizen science who want to involve the public in data collection, in part to increase environmental and resilience literacy, scientific literacy, if you will, but also to learn about their environments in doing that. I know both of the state and you, Todd, at the Coastal Fed are engaged in a lot of citizen science. Is there anything in that realm where you're looking for faculty to be engaged?
I think there's a number of opportunities. The key that I want to work out is to make sure that whatever is collected or done is, it's thought through as to how it's going to be used, so that people don't get excited and then it just, the information not get properly used.
Absolutely.
But I mean, like the recent Coastal Habitat Protection Plan update really focuses on the problem of nutrient enrichment of our coastal estuaries, and the lack of data on what's actually occurring is, there are many gaps in that across the coast and the state, and so there, particularly if it's done with good supervision, where it's quality assured and could be used in our water quality of the state's formal water quality evaluations, and then it would be very good information to have. So
great. Well, we are at our appointed hour. Questions went quickly, so I want to just take another opportunity to thank both Andrea and Todd for joining us today, and thank those of you who were able to tune in. Really appreciate it, and then we hope to keep going. As I think all of us said at the beginning, there's so much work to be done. There's so much need. We just look forward at NC State to partnering with everyone to move our common agendas forward. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it.